Hey everyone, welcome back to another podcast. This is the One of None podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Andrew Ganong.
And I'm Dr. Jonah Casella, your other host.
And we have a unique one today. And it's something that's been weighing on me in particular a little bit lately. First off, happy Easter to everybody. We're filming this podcast right around the Wednesday after Easter. So we hope you had a really great Easter weekend, Good Friday, all that. And Jonah, you want to say anything before we dive into some of the stuff we're talking about today?
Yeah, just thanks everybody that's listening and that continues to listen to the podcast, and we hope you're enjoying it and getting something out of it. And like he said, happy Easter. Hope you guys got to see your family, spend some time with loved ones, and not just have a break off from work, but really understand what Easter's about. And that's kind of what we're going to get into today.
Yeah, exactly. I had a wonderful Easter. I don't go home a whole lot during the Easter holiday just because I don't have, I try to use my flights home to go home when there's days off, and we didn't have any days off obviously for Easter, but I've been particularly emotional in a good way, as I was telling Jonah before the podcast started, about Easter. And just I've been feeling like an overwhelming sense of gratitude over the course of the weekend. And I know that Jonah and I have kind of alluded to this topic before in the past, and it hasn't been super in depth. I think we've kind of just said something on the surface level, but faith is something that affects me and Jonah a lot, and something that we hold close to us. And we're in different parts of our journey with our faith, and it's really cool to see both of us in our journey. And that's what today's topic is about. And it's going to be a little bit different than our typical podcast, just because a lot of this stuff we have is prepared and we know what we're diving into. But I have some questions for Jonah and just some conversational pieces today that I wanted to talk with him about. And I think there's not really a way to do it other than just ask some questions and get some organic answers out of it. So I guess the first one that I have for you, Jonah, is I just want you to give me an idea of what it was like, if you had any background in your faith growing up. Did you grow up in a household that had religion like intertwined growing up, or is this more of like a novel thing for you?
Yeah, so I didn't grow up going to church. My parents weren't specifically religious. When I asked my mom and dad later on about it, they never baptized me as a kid. And what their response was that we wanted it to leave it up to you guys, to you kids, once you got older, to decide what you wanted to do. I don't know if that was really their intention or not, or if it was just because they weren't like religious, like that religious to begin with, and so we just didn't go to church or what. But so yeah, no, I didn't grow up going to church. My parents didn't discuss religion with me or anything like that. It was really foreign and honestly kind of like taboo, I would say, is the way I felt, and like my brother and I felt, and some of our friends, which is like terrible to think about now, but just being kids thinking like the people that go to church, like they're weird, that was kind of how, like, it just wasn't like talked about enough. So it was so like foreign to us growing up.
I think that's how a lot of us grew up though, too. Like that taboo. I think the word taboo is a good example for it. I think kind of the same way for me. I grew up in a home that placed priority on God, but I think when you were growing up, you kind of like just brush it to the wayside, and you do it because in my case, I did it because I knew it was good for me. But That's interesting because this is our really first time diving into it personally. I mean, I know on surface level what your faith is like, especially more recently, but I didn't know growing up what that was like. So, um, now, did you have any influences in like high school? Did your friend, like any friends, have faith or believe, or was it ever a talked about subject, or not really?
I mean, not really. I definitely had a few friends that were religious and growing up, but it wasn't like something that we talked about. It's like I don't know. It was almost like even again football and stuff. Like like when I was in like midget football, um, like we prayed before games. Like we said the Lord's Prayer before games. I didn't like really know why or like I don't know. It felt good to do it, but I didn't know why. And like even in high school playing football, like drawing crosses on our like tape and stuff. It was like looking back, it's just like cringy because it's like I didn't like know anything about it. You know what I mean? It was
Yeah,
almost like it's just I saw the people that were older doing it or like in professional sports and things like that, you know.
yeah.
So no, we didn't really like none of my friends were um discussing it.
Now, did you? So I guess fast forward a little bit. Was there any instance, I guess, into college and stuff like that? Was there an instance that you really like felt, all right, there's a higher being potentially, or was there a time where you remember having a conversation with yourself, like, is the idea of a higher being even possible? Or when did you start to ponder things, I guess, whether
Yeah.
it was a reality or not? Because
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
that's something that we all struggle with is like, okay, it's faith. Faith is believing in something in the unknown. And how do I actually have a realistic conversation with myself about whether this person or being is real versus not?
yeah, it's a good question. This is probably something that a lot of people, like everybody, thinks about. Um, I mean, even whenever I was younger, I would say I definitely thought about it because, like, I knew of religion, and so I definitely like thought, like, is there really, is there really the God, this person that, like you're saying, is like it's all passed down, right? So, like, where's the proof? I think that's always how I looked at it, and it made me be doubtful for a long time because it's like I had to have this like concrete evidence, and because I never went to church to hear anything about it, then I definitely didn't really believe that there was. I didn't know what to think, but I definitely questioned it a lot, and I questioned it. I mean, all the way until I was in college. And had that internal debate, especially because I was, we're in the sciences and mathematics, and so it's like everything is so concrete. Like a math problem has the right and there's one answer. Science and biology, like it makes sense. You can track it, but like religion was always something that was like this unknown in a way. And so yeah, I had no idea or had like no real belief in it until I was in college.
So what then what flipped the switch for you? Was it like, well, I know that we used to go to some of those services on Wednesday nights, you, me, and Brady and Chris. What did like flip the switch for you? Was there a time where you remember like, okay, this is when I'm gonna commit myself to Christ? Was it like a super informal thing, or was it more recent? Like,
I'll tell you that what sparked it was meeting you and meeting the guys like you just talked about. And then the other big part of that was meeting Aubrey. You guys were all religious. Aubrey is religious. And just starting to have those conversations with you guys and with her and discussing things. And then, yeah, like going with you guys to those Wednesday nights and experiencing it and listening to it and stuff like that's what really kind of like started it, like my curiosity. And I'd say at first I was more curious than I was like, yeah, okay, I fully believe, right? It's kind of like I want to believe in this because I share a lot of values with like what this stands for, but like I like want I need to be like convinced more. Like I need to see more evidence and like understand it. And I distinctly remember one service in the actual church where the movie theater is in Indiana, where Aubrey and I went, and he was preaching, and he had a slideshow, and it was um, like talking about some like science or something like that. And it's like, here's all the known literature and historical data on this that everybody trusts and believes. And it's like, hundreds of or thousands of articles, whatever. And then he's like, here's all the known documents that are physical documents that we have over centuries, thousands like of years, that all talk about Christ and God. And it's like, it was like 50 or 60 or 1,000 or something. And so that was like the first like statistical piece of evidence that was like, oh wow, like okay, like this, like that's what I felt like I needed in a way. Was like I needed to like see the proof almost. Like that was like a key thing for me. That like really was like hit me and struck me like, okay, like I felt that I had a reason to continue with it and like and learn more about it and have more faith that it's real.
Yeah. I needed the same thing. I struggle with that a lot, and you already hit on the point that I wanted to talk about too. Was we are in the sciences, and it's hard to have those two, science, religion, have them coincide is very difficult because they contradict each other. Obviously, when you're talking about evolution and the start of creation, and that's still something that I struggle with. I went and read a book. It's called A Case for Christ, and it was written by a former atheist who went out to disprove God, and everything that he found was contradicting what he had initially believed. And so he was an atheist turned Christian that wrote the book. And it's still, even after reading that, there's overwhelming evidence, and I still struggle with that. And now I'm much further along in my faith journey than I used to be, but I definitely still question things sometimes. And and I think that's normal too, and I think that's good because it keeps you curious, it keeps you on your toes, and it gives you a reason to dive deeper into these things. And if anything, it makes you more strong once you find the data or you find what you are not looking for, and it gives you more concrete picture of like what that means to you and if you want to pursue that. And I think that's what everyone should go through. And I think it's really hard to be a Christian nowadays. And growing up, I felt the same way, that it was taboo, and you were too cool to do that stuff. You wanted to be a rebel growing up, whether it was in middle school or high school. So I went through that. In fact, actually, our high school made it a pretty big point. So my rebel phase of not being a like good Christian kid was pretty short, because we focused a lot on that in high school, which was really nice. But I didn't really start to pursue my relationship um, realistically until like I got to Jacksonville. And I grew up heavily in, my dad, of my mom. Like
Yeah.
those were two very, very faithful people to Christ. And I have I have my mom's pamphlet from her service that our old pastor did at our church in Pittsburgh. And my dad made these, and it's God is always faithful. And it's a little pamphlet. It had a picture of my mom at the top, and it says God is always faithful underneath it. And I think to myself all the time, I'm like, I see that, and there's a little bit of a picture under, or there's words underneath it. And I think to myself, after losing your wife, that's what you choose to put on that pamphlet, is God is always faithful. After he completely ripped everything out of your hands and said, basically, start over with two young kids, take away the love of your life and take away the mother of your children. And then my dad decides to put that at the top, is God is always faithful. So that's something I carry with me. And that's what I've always known was my dad was always very faithful. We didn't go to church every single Sunday, but he also didn't want to put me in a position where I had to go because he didn't want me to hate it. And I'm very grateful for that too because it gave me the opportunity to find it on my own. Now, have you had any instance where you feel like you were directly like affected by God, or you felt like a presence, or that there was no way that it was just coincidental, that there was something that happened that like you felt compelled to like maybe seek God, or you felt that it was definitely God that was controlling the situation?
Um, well, like looking back, and I even felt this way in college too. Looking back at how things played out after high school, where like I was dead set on going to a different university um, to play football, and then still pursue my career that I'm in now. But I, was like, this is where I want to go. Like to the point where like IUP was not really on my radar because I wanted to play football, and I also didn't want to be that close to home. And it didn't work out. We talked about that. My dad was like, listen, like you got to make the decision. Like this is a hard choice. I know that you're not going to like it, but IUP is where you need to go. This makes the most sense financially for you. And was like really like heartbroken by that at first. And then it turned out to be a blessing because like I met you and I met Aubrey, and like meeting Aubrey and you guys like then introduced me to religion, and that was like the first step I took towards my faith. And there was like a lot of dominoes that had to fall into place to get me in the position to like if I don't play rugby, I never meet Aubrey, right? Like if I don't go to IUP, I don't play rugby. And like so there's a lot of things I look back on now that like people can chalk up to coincidence or whatever, but I think that that's just what was meant to be, and because of what his plan was for me personally, and because he knew that it would push me towards the right people and then would push me into faith. And so that's something that I look back on now and feel pretty strongly about, that's what was going on
I
there.
100% agree. I
um,
agree.
and I had one experience. And then so Aubrey and I, we were going to church only on the holidays, like her family's church where she grew up going to. And then we stopped going there and going to church altogether. I mean, I did rotations and stuff, and I was obviously in Philly for a while, so wasn't going to church in Philly. It wasn't until like we moved into our apartment now that we were then actively looking for a church. And not long after we moved into this apartment, it was like that summer or like that spring or summer, um, we were at the parkway, the trail walking our dog Evie at the time. And this couple, like middle-aged couple, came up to us and were, like they had a pamphlet for the church, and it was the pastor. And he said, hey, we're having this event. Like you have a dog. We're doing like a doggy 5K at our church. Like you should come check it out. And long story short, that's the church that we go to now. And that
Yeah.
pastor is the person that married us on our second wedding. you know um but like it's all these dominoes falling into place. And then when we first started going to church, one of the first like one or two, first or second time we were there, I forget what he was talking about, but I also have like a lot of I'm rambling here a little bit, but I have a lot of, now that I am a believer, like for a while I had a lot of heavy like weight on my shoulders and like stress on my heart about like things I've done in the past growing up and stupid stuff I've done, and like that I've just have like weighed on me for like a long time. And like I'm obviously kind of like harsh on myself too, but there were some things that just weighed on my heart heavy. And there was a time where he was talking about it. It's like the first or second time we were there, where he was talking about like you need like letting things go, and like giving yourself to Christ means that like you give your sins to him, and like he died for your sins, so don't hold on to them anymore. Learn from it, be a better person, ask for forgiveness and repent. And like, and I remember sitting there and like just feeling like I was like almost getting like lightheaded. Like I was like getting like tunnel vision. Um, and it was like, I mean, like chills thinking about it because it was like freaking me out when I was sitting in there, and I like felt like really weird and almost like sick feeling. And then after that, I never felt that again. And like I like asked for forgiveness many, many times, and like have since like that weight's kind of lifted. But that was like a very specific point early on for me that was like really kind of weird. And like when I was still kind of questioning things, and then when that happened, I was like, that's just too weird, you know? So that was like a big moment for me.
I think that gives me chills, honestly, like just hearing that, because it's so interesting, and whoever's listening right now, like you could be anywhere in your journey. You might not even you might be atheist, you might not believe, you might be agnostic, you could be really far into your faith journey. But the thing that I have noticed within the past year and a half of really accelerating my faith and what Jonah's experiencing is when you ask for him to make himself present, he will do it. It might not be in the way that you want, but he might bring you to your knees if that's what you're asking for. If you're asking to for him to show his presence, he might bring you to your knees, and it might be in a way that you are not expecting it. In the way that Jonah, I think he was a curious guy at the time, looking for some answers and looking for some guidance. And I think Jonah, who knows, maybe that was God trying to talk to you that way. And I didn't have a lot of those experiences growing up, yeah, at all. And then it was all in Jacksonville. It was all in Jacksonville that came to me. And I always thought that people who were claiming that they had these existential experiences or out of body experiences with Christ, I thought they were full of it, honestly. I thought it was some weird, like, I don't even know what the taboo, I guess is the word. Yeah, like taboo kind of experiences. And I'll tell you a quick story since you just explained that. It made me think of it. I'm flying home. I had a bunch of flight troubles. I went home for a quick weekend, like a couple weekends ago. And on the flight home, I got to Pittsburgh Airport for my flight. Go over to the gate. It's delayed by like 6 hours. So I was sitting in the airport, just doing nothing, basically watching the Players Championship that was in Jacksonville at the time, waiting. And I gotten to know some people just through talking about what we were going to do if we were going to try to find a new flight because they didn't have a pilot. So long story short, we end up boarding. Pilot comes, we end up boarding, and I get placed next to an older lady who is from Pittsburgh that now lives in Jacksonville. And we're talking and we're getting situated on the flight, and she explains that her grandson just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. So she's been flying back and forth from Jacksonville to Pittsburgh to help the mom, her daughter out, and help her grandson out and go to his appointments with him and stuff. And he had just been diagnosed 2 weeks prior. So ask some follow-up questions, and we're chatting about the fact that he is getting treatment at Children's Hospital, which is where I was treated when I had cancer too. So we start to talking, and I tell her about my story and stuff, and she is, she's crying, like, oh my gosh, what are the chances that I sit down next to you and we have this experience? And she goes on to tell me that she's strong in her faith, and I told her that that's important to dive into, because this is a time where you can potentially drift away in your faith when things come crumbling down and the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You tend to ask, why God, why? So I told her, I said, lean into your faith during this time. I gave her the background story on my mom too. And, we're talking about her faith, and I said, where do you go to church at? She's like, oh my gosh, I would be nowhere without my church. I go to Orchard Hill Church in Wexford. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So people out there listening, that's the church that we moved to Pittsburgh in '99. We got invited to go to that church. My parents did. And at the time we moved to Pittsburgh because my mom had to get treatment in Pittsburgh. We were originally living in Harrisburg. So Orchard Hill has been our church since 1999. And that was where my mom had her funeral service too. The old pastor at the time had done the funeral service. And so I tell her this, and more tears keep coming down. She's freaking out. And I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. We just got on like this whole tangent of talking. And I said, I'm Andrew. I'm a physical therapist in Jacksonville. And she said, I'm Kathy, which is my mom's name. And I asked her how she spelled it, and she spells it the same exact way. And she said, well, what's your mom's full name? I said, Kathy Ann Ganung. She goes, I'm Kathy Ann. My middle name is Ann. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like, and she's like, looks like she's blonde haired, short haired, just like my mom. I showed her a picture of my mom. Dude, like that, it was crazy. It can, like, within seconds can make me cry right now because there's no chance that can happen. There's no chance that happens where I sit down and all this happens. So, that's one thing. And whatever, chalk it up to coincidence. That you can say that it was just coincidental seeing this lady, and they happen to have the same first and middle name, and we happen to go to the same church and all this stuff. But I have been looking for this for like 10 years. And I said this on the previous podcast when we briefly talked about our faith, was when I was in middle school and high school, I always wanted to feel passionate about Christ. And I wanted to because I felt like it would make me better. I aligned myself, just like you said, about the qualities that I lived my life by. But I never understood what the passion was behind it. And I always wanted that. And I always used to pray for it. So when I moved to Jacksonville, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just moved there because I felt an inclination to do so. And I never realized why. So my dad's moving me into my apartment whenever I first moved to Jacksonville. And we're driving by a church that I was told to go check out. It was called Church of 1122, which is now my home church and where I was baptized last year. And we're driving by, we're going towards the beach, and it's right on the way to the beach. So I'm passing it, and I pointed out to my dad, I said, that's the church that I want to go to. It's church that was recommended to me. Apparently a lot of people go. And I was like, yeah, apparently they do the services at like 11:22, like the time, 11:22 a.m. And I looked down at my watch, and it's like 11:22. And I'm like, this is crazy. And like ever since then, I have been so unapologetically passionate about my faith that I just, that's what I look for on my weekends, and I look for during the week. I can't really explain it, and I don't even really, like, it's just something that I feel inside, and I pray that everyone feels the same way I get to feel right now, because I am not deserving of it. If anything, I think I pushed my relationship away with Christ for a long time because of my family history and the stuff that's gone on in my life. And I never really wanted to pursue it because of these things. And I was always scared to. But if you truly seek God and you seek the relationship with him, he's going to make it abundantly clear. And be sure to open your eyes and not think of things as coincidences, and be open to those things. And I'm not the best Christian. I don't read my Bible every single day. I don't go to church every single Sunday, although I really tried to go every single Sunday. I am by no means the ideal Christian. And I don't know what really that looks like. I know what my relationship with Christ looks like. And Jonah, yours is going to look so different. And I think that's the great thing about a relationship with Christ. And the way my mom used to really dive into her faith is she would just spend time talking to him. It wasn't about a tally mark, going to church every Sunday and showing up because you needed to and because it was going to do a good deed. My mom used to go on walks and talk to Christ like there was somebody right next to her. And I know that one day I am going to go to the gates of heaven and there's could be a guard there, and they're going to ask, who said that you can come? And I'm going to tell them that the man on the middle cross told me I could come, and that by no doing of my time here on earth, besides the one decision of fully believing that Christ died on the cross for my sins, for me in particular, that I fully believe that, then I get to spend eternity with the God of the universe. And that's the only thing I have to do. It isn't tally marks, in my opinion. It's not tally marks. It's not how many times you show up to church. It's not how many times that you've knelt down on your knees and gone to the altar and prayed. It's about the one simple act of believing. It's the easiest thing to do, but being a Christian is the hardest thing to do nowadays. And living your life fully in that. And I went on a tangent for a good while right there, so I apologize. But
No,
this,
that's it's it's a great story. I mean, the plain story is just like you said, unbelievable. Like I don't think that's a coincidence. I know you don't either.
no,
And um, I'm really happy that you have the passion, like you have that passion. I'm still looking for it. Um, just being completely forthcoming, like, I'm still learning and figuring things out. And, you know, I'm a Christian, like I have full faith that Christ died for my sins, and, that like my sins have been forgiven for his death, and that I'm going to go to heaven. I have full faith in that. And my decisions going forward, like you said, it's not about the tally marks, but there is a way of that you should live your life as a Christian, or just a good person, honestly, going forward, to make sure that you stay on that path. But you're eventually, I know that I'll have the passion that you have. It just hasn't. It's just not quite there yet, and maybe things will change. Maybe it'll take having kids or something like that. But every time that I go to church, I feel a little bit closer to it. And like the more that Aubrey and I at night, we have it's like a study Bible, and there's like an app, and there's it's supposed to be every single day. We do it probably like 75% of the time, um, where we sit down, listen to the as it walks you through the Bible and stuff. And every time I feel a little bit closer to that, and like my understanding of everything. But yeah, eventually I'm sure I'll have that same passion as you do. So I'm happy that you have that with the church you're at now. And I had kind of something I wrote down, a question for you, because when you're talking about you growing up, like you went to church, you guys were religious, but you as a kid, like you weren't fully invested in that, as kids oftentimes aren't anyway. But something that I think I've discovered, not I think something that I've discovered, um, is that like I really like my church community. It's very small, and it's not necessarily that like I'm hanging out with them all the time. We've met a couple that we do hang out with from time to time from church and things like that. But just like I at first going to church, I felt so uncomfortable because I just didn't know how I would fit into that and or anything about it. And now going to church, it's like I know everybody that goes to my church. Like I say hi to everybody, we catch up. Like it's a really nice community. So like going back to like that really terrible time of like your mother passing away, I remember you mentioning years ago about how like your church came together to like help you and your family, like your dad, by making food and dishes and things like that for you guys, so that you didn't have to worry about dinners and things like that. And I think that that's like such a huge part of what it means to be a church, is the community that's involved with it. And I think that like I can't imagine how much that had to have helped. Like you may not have seen it as a kid, of course, but like your dad, I'm sure, was like so appreciative of what the church did for you guys. And there's families that like that are in our church that have been sick, and like Aubrey's made food for them and taken it to them and stuff. And it's just like coming together as a community is such an important part. Like did you ever feel that as a kid during that time? Like I know that's a really tough question because you were young, but
Yeah, I think I don't remember. I remember the sense of community. My church wasn't massive by any means, but it was probably bigger than your average. And I think I probably appreciated it more when I came to find out of all that. When I was told about all of that stuff, because I didn't see it a whole lot. My dad kind of sheltered me from that, not in a not in a bad way, but I think he did it just because he wanted to like kind of out of sight, out of mind, where it wasn't
Sure.
like you don't want to remind consistently. Like it was already I
Yeah.
think bad enough. So I'm sure he was probably doing a lot of behind the scenes work. Well, I know he was, but I came to realize the community more, and when I matured in my emotions and my mindset. But um, I think we have a huge box at home of all the letters that were written to our family. Now I've dove into some of those before, and I've looked at that stuff, and um, you know, I think it's also part of my mom, who she was, because she was she was the type of person that would do anything for anybody. She was an ideal person at church. She was the one that people wanted to be like. And so I think that was a full reciprocation of who she was. So I think when you give so freely, you see that in return. And I think a lot of times too we get bogged down in like um, you know, the universe versus you know, like religion. And I think I fully believe that what you put out there, you will get in return too. Whether it's the form of God or the universe coming together to meet you where you're at, I think that's super important. But I think that's exactly who my mom was. And so people really knew who she was and they wanted to provide that to my family because they knew that. And I think that's why, just as much as it's important to have that community, you need to invest in your community too. Because at any circumstance, anything can be taken from you, and you will have a family, an extended family to rely on. And I really like that. And I think that's something I don't do enough of. And that's something that I really want to be good at is try to invest more in my community and not just take. I want to be able to give too. And that I didn't really think about that much. So I like that you asked that question because I think I take a lot more than I give. And when you, I don't know, I think I'm in a constant state of that right now just because I've been getting so much out of taking and I've been really soaking up everything that I need to dish out more. And yeah, I think that's part of it too. And my church now is a bigger church. So it's hard to it's not hard to invest in it. It's easy to. There's plenty of opportunities to, and that's something that's been on my radar for a little bit. I think the difficult part with with where I'm at right now is I I have to cut out the time to do it and just fully put myself in that situation where I can give back to people.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I wasn't like you shouldn't be so hard on yourself for one. Also, I mean, if you're looking to get back, obviously it doesn't have to be financially. Um, there, I don't know how your church is. I'm sure that it's like this though. Just like any church, like we have little ministries, and so our church is very small. Next time that you're here, if you're here on the weekend, I'll take you if it ever works out that way. It's super small, so there's a little bit of grass that needs to be cut. Like it's not a huge lot or anything, and then the church has to be cleaned every week. And so, like I'm on one of the ministries, if you want to call it that, that does like the lawn care. So it's like once a month, it's my turn. I cut and weed whack the grass, and then Aubrey and I once a month clean the church. It's like our way of like being a part of that community because it is so small, and then like our way of giving back. So there has to be like little things you can do. We're kind of getting off on a sidetrack from the point of this, but I wouldn't be so hard on yourself because there's things that you could probably feel good about doing that isn't like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I fully want to, and Um, yeah, it's like faith is such like an interesting thing because I wanted to make sure I circled back when you were talking about your journey. Um, I I did not have the passion that I have now up until recently, and so I feel like I almost am coming off on some type of like higher ground where I'm not. Like it took me so long, and all it took was a church to find that. That's all it was. It just took me, and that's where I think God directed me here to this church was because that's all it was. It was a flip of a switch, and then all of a sudden I wanted to invest all this time and energy in my faith, and I wanted to get baptized, and you know, it went from 0 to 100 out of nowhere, and it was all because I came to church here in Jacksonville, and it doesn't always look that way either. Like you don't have to be balls to the wall with your faith like in an immediate second. Like it's going to take time. I feel like for a lot of people, and I'm no person to give advice on that either. I just know what I've experienced in my own life, and that's all I can really go off of is the anecdotal experience that I've had. And it's up and down, and there's times where I don't feel passion too. I feel so much passion for months, and then like I lose it, and I don't know where it went, and then I get it again. And so I think overall this Easter weekend had me reflecting a lot on so much stuff. It had me reflecting on my own faith journey and the true meaning of the sacrifice that was provided on my behalf. And you know, I think that I was talking to Hannah about this yesterday about the real reason why it's important to do this because our time on earth is so short. And I know that when it comes down to it, that ultimately when my time comes, I'm going to be on my knees begging. And I know where I want to end up. And it's a very real thing. And I think it's called like the foxhole or something, and the foxhole prayer or something along those lines. Someone once told me that when guys are in battle and they are getting they are getting shot at, that a lot of time it's a very real thing where they go when they're in their foxhole or whatever, they pray and they believe in God in that moment because they know that their time could potentially be coming and they know where they want to end up. So at the end of the day, you can say all you want about, I don't really care where I end up. If your life is flashing before your eyes, there's a pretty big chance I have an idea where you're going to want to end up at. I mean, I know where I want to end up and where I want to spend eternity. And my time on earth is very short in comparison to my eternity. And I know where I want to be. And I know there's people that I want to see. Uh, and And if all that I have to do is devote my life to Christ and accept the gift that was provided to me, I'm going to do it 10 times over, 100 times over. And such a small sacrifice for such a long term gain. And I think that's what's getting me so emotional about all this stuff is Brandon Lake sings a song called Gratitude. It's like such a common song nowadays, and it's like played in every single church. But it's like, uh, I have nothing else to give but a hallelujah. I don't have anything. There's nothing that I can do on this earth that's going to like be impressive to God. I have absolutely nothing to provide and besides just praising him, and I'm going to do that every single day that I can. And so I've been making more of an effort to put myself out there in a way, in a vulnerable way, and sometimes uncomfortable way to put my faith out there and share the word of God. That's all I'm doing is just sharing the word of God. If it can reach one extra person, then I'm doing my job right. And I try and live that way in the clinic too. And I don't know, do you try and do that too, Jonah? Do you try and live that way in the clinic?
Yeah, I mean, and something that I was going to touch on that leads into that is that, you know, a lot of how I go about my life and like being a Christian is being a decent human being, being decent to people. Like that's part of the community thing is, um, I think that being a good, genuine person and caring for other people is part of what it means to be Christian as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I take that into work every day. You have to have that sympathy for other people, to do the type of work that we do. And, there are really sick people that I see sometimes, that are coming in, and maybe it's not their eyes, but they have a lot of other medical issues, or even people where it's like their husband or wife is really sick or has just passed away. And like, I'll have conversations with people about, like, you're being, leaning into your faith in that time, and praying, and finding comfort in that. Like, there's one woman that I saw, many times for an issue she was having. And she, her husband has dementia and Alzheimer's, and is in like like a nursing home, essentially, specifically for that. And it's like, it was like around the holidays, and it was like a lot for her to deal with. And like, we had conversations about faith and leaning into it. And, you know, like, this is just somebody that I've met only a couple times, but, a few times at that point. And she really touched my heart to the point where, like, I wrote her a Christmas card, and just to let her know that, I was thinking about her, and hope that she was able to make the most out of her holiday, and just, God bless her, and that, just keeping her in my thoughts and stuff. And that goes such a long way for people. It means a lot. It meant a lot to me, to do that. A lot of times when you're in these positions, like we're in this career, you're like a counsel for people. Um, I think I'm a therapist half the time, and I definitely bring faith into that.
Yeah, I mean, you bring faith into our friendship too. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and I know you do it with others. But I think it's important. An important part of our job, is yeah, it's treating people and getting people better in the medical field. But if I have an opportunity to bring someone to even just a thought about Christ, I'm going to do it every single time. And there's a time and place for it. It's not going to be all the time, but um, yeah, I mean, it's such an overwhelming thing, and in fact, one of my best friends in Jacksonville, he was a patient of mine, and he rides pro motocross, and he got in a gnarly accident. He was racing on July 4th weekend, and came to me last 2 years ago now, I guess, July of 2022, and he had basically he got in a crash, got knocked out, got a bike peg into his like posterior shoulder, just completely ripped his rotator cuff to shreds. So he had surgery, came and saw me. We got relatively close over the time there, and he was wearing a bracelet one day that he was checking in, and it was a service that I brought my sister and my dad to when they came to visit me, and it was an 1122 bracelet, and I didn't realize it until he was like going to check in online or check in at the front, and I was like, "Oh, do you go to 1122?" He's like, "Yeah, I do." Just started going there, and I was like, "Oh, no way! Okay, I do too. I just recently moved down here and looking for a church, and I went there. I really like it." So fast forward, where once we finished up his plan of care, we started going, we exchanged numbers and started going to church together, and we got baptized together last year. And then I don't go to church without him now. So he's like one of my best friends, and I met him in the clinic, and um, he's someone I chill with all the time. And I was lucky enough to get baptized alongside of him. And he's someone who similarly was going through the faith journey with just as much passion as I was. And we go and kneel at the altar together, and we lift our hands up at church, which I used to think was so cringy. And now it's like, I have nothing better to do besides just doing that. And so it's crazy what God can do and what He can place in our lives when we least expect it. And I think that's ultimately something that we should be having a lot of gratitude for, not just around Easter, but around all the time. And I'm early on in my faith journey. I know you are too, man. But it's been an overwhelming one, and I think that this is just the beginning for us. So this is not an easy topic to talk about, and I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to do it, is because I wanted to do something that was a little different than our normal. We're talking about going hard as heck 24/7, going 1,000%. And I think I love talking about that more than anything, but sometimes it's nice to settle down a little bit and talk about some of the more important issues, which is how we live our
Yeah.
lives through Christ. So,
Right. That's definitely the most important thing that's easily forgotten that I don't think about enough for sure. There are a lot of times though during the runs and the workouts that I don't want to do, and I think about how blessed I am to have the opportunity to make the decision to go out and run. And there's so many people that um, can't do that. They're injured. People go to work, get mangled. And all they want to do is be able to stand up and hug somebody, and like we have the opportunity to do so much. So I always take that away as part of like just being so blessed in our everyday life to just get up and stand up and get out of bed and have the opportunity to make the most of every day.
yeah,
But religion has brought a lot to me. It's given a lot to me. I mean, and I'm dedicated to learning more, becoming more passionate about it, not just for me, but for Aubrey and also for, our future family. If, we're blessed with kids, like I want to raise them in the church and have that in their life earlier on. Because I think it's very, very important. But this podcast was your idea, and it is uncomfortable. And honestly, like going into it, I was uncomfortable. I was unsure how it was going to play out, especially because I'm so new to religion. Like I didn't have that like imposter syndrome, like I told you. And honestly, it's made me feel so much better about it. So I'm glad that we did it.
good. I'm glad. I don't. It's so different for different people. There's like no, like I said before, I don't think of it as anything you can really be prepared for besides just speaking to your heart about how you feel about it. And whether you were about to throw me a curveball and say I don't believe, or tell me that you've been in deep in your journey with Christ for 20 years now, it wouldn't have mattered because we would have still talked about it. And I think conversation around it's important. That makes me happy you say that, because it's definitely a difficult topic, especially nowadays in our current culture. There's a lot of associations that come with being Christian, and um, it was it's the easiest gift to receive, but the hardest to really live out. And I actually read a statistic that Christianity is the most mocked religion that there is, and I'm going to continue to stand firm in my foundation, whether it's popular or not. I know how I feel about it. I know where I want my eternity to be. I know where I want your eternity to be. So if I can bring some people alongside me too, I'm going to do it all the time. So I'm really happy you got something from it, JC. But I think that about wraps it up. Unless you have something else, we obviously appreciate everyone listening. A little different than what we've been talking about. So we hope you enjoyed it. Just know that we're all on different paths in our ultimate journey with Christ. Wherever you're at, He'll meet you there. I believe that. And I think that's not even really an opinion. I think that's more a fact. I don't know much. I don't know a whole lot about the stories in the scripture, and I know the basic things, but I'm not the first person to speak on it in terms of higher moral high ground or anything like that. I'm not a better person because of it. I just know my experience, and that's all that we're talking about. And same thing for Jonah. And it's your journey is your journey wherever you're at in it. So we hope that if you listen to this, that you really got something from the podcast. We really enjoyed talking about it, and hopefully having a guest on the next podcast. So keep sharing, keeping up with the podcast, and we will likely see you on the next one. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys. And we hope you had a blessed Easter and you remember what it was about and you were able to be with your family. And again, thanks for listening. And just like Andrew said, we hope that you got something out of it. So we'll see you next time.
All right. Peace.
Peace.